Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Wisden India versus England awards show. India have levelled things up in Chennai with a comprehensive 317-run win, where in truth England were completely out of the test from early on day two. Before we go any further, a reminder that if you've got any opinions on the test or you have any opinions on the changes you think sides should make ahead of the third test, let us know in the comments. And if you like the show, hit the like button and subscribe. I'm Yas Rana, and I'm joined by the Wisden.com managing editor Ben Gardner and Wisden India's Rupin Kale. Ben, I'll start with you. How dare India prepare a pitch where it plays well enough that when they bat, they can score 300, but when they bowl, it turns into a raging Bunsen burner and England can't get more than 150. How unfair.
Yeah, it was really dastardly of them. Our first mute drama of the video. Sure, it won't be the last. But yeah, I mean, Ashwin loves spinning pitches so much that not only is he unplayable on them, but he turns into Gary Sobers with the bat when he's batting as well. Yeah, I mean, you know, the pitch wasn't one that suited England, but India just absolutely outplayed England in every single facet of the game, in their fielding, in their batting and their bowling, and it was a thoroughly deserved win. Obviously, I guess the thing is though, is that there is, as much as, you know, there were England fans who were sort of complaining about the pitch too much. This was a sort of a sign of respect, I suppose, for England, that India felt that this was a pitch that would kind of take the toss out of the equation a little bit, whereas if they prepared a flat pitch like they normally would and banked on themselves to kind of beat anyone, actually they knew that England could beat them. And the hope for England fans is the next test won't be a pitch quite like this, but they will still need to play a lot better than they did in this game if they are to stay in the series, I think.
Yeah, we'll get on to the differences we will probably expect in the day-night test. But I guess from an English point of view, there aren't that many positives from this test. And one positive that I took from an English point of view was how little the English team actually complained. Like obviously on social media, England fans, particularly towards the beginning of the test match, were going kind of crazy, saying, oh, this is a disgrace. A lot of prominent pundits saying it was a disgrace. But actually, England were quite careful not to blame the pitch at any point. Joe Root, after the game, didn't do that. Whenever anyone did media duty during the test, no one did that as well. Rupin, more positively, let's go to India. How impressed were you by them coming back from a very rare, very, very rare home defeat to beat England so emphatically here in Chennai?
A defeat at home is not something that we are used to as India fans and people who follow Indian cricket. But I have almost started thinking that it is a good thing for India, because the last time they lost at home, the first test against Australia, they won the entire series. The last time they lost in Australia, the first test, they won again. So it somehow just probably just spurs them on to do better, I guess. And I think the crowd aspect also played a big part, because this Indian team, especially the team under Kohli, it feeds off the crowd's energy, whether it's negative or positive. And I think the crowd not being there in a home test, they are just not used to it, because everywhere they go, they are just used to noise and, you know, a lot of people supporting them. So yeah, I think this was a good turnaround for them through everything. Like Ben said, all three facets were great. And a big player stepped up, Rohit, Rahane, Ashwin. So it has set up the series very nicely for the day-night test in Ahmedabad.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we said last week, whatever happens in the day-night test match, the series will be alive going into the series finale. And I think your point on energy is a good one. Kohli said at the end of play that that energy was probably missing from India in the first test. So the crowd probably did play a role in that. Rupin, let's go to the first award nomination, which you're giving to the man who, for me, actually was the person who was most important in the game. I think he effectively won the test match for the way he batted on the opening day.
So the first award is Rohit Sharma, who gets the David Warner Award for just being a game changer at home. And it's just, I think this shows why the Indian management trusts him so much, where even if they see a little sign of him showing something special, then they won't drop him no matter what. So I think that paid off this time. And it's just the way he took the game away from the opposition, like as he does always in limited overs cricket. What he did was he just stopped England's approach altogether with his vintage attacking style, and which is what we have associated with David Warner for so long. And the innings that comes to mind, which is similar to this, is David Warner in Perth in 2012, where he just, where India, I think, were bowled out under 200, and David Warner just took control, and no one else reached three figures in that entire game, I think, apart from him. And he really helped set the pace, set the tone for the game, this in a similar way that Rohit did. And the both of them at home, it's just their average at home is just incredible. They are completely different players when they play in their own pitches, and they have more hundreds than 50s at home, which is quite a crazy start to have. And yeah, it's just Rohit Sharma was the typical game changer that we have associated with him in limited overs cricket.
Yeah, I think for me, if you're looking for the defining passage of this game, it's between lunch and tea on day one when India sort of race along without losing a wicket. I think this was. I mean, as much as the wicket wasn't played, this wicket went 250 was probably about par, and from that session onwards, it looked like India were going to get quite a lot more than that. And Rohit was just brilliant. He was yeah, as you say, he was attacking, but not overly so. He kind of knew his shots, and he didn't really look in trouble at all. Like, as much as other players kind of sort of found a way to negate the pitch. And Ashwin was quite attacking. Kale was sort of like was very, very sort of in control and measured. Rohit just like didn't look like it phased him at all. And I'm really glad he's played it, because you're right, there was a little bit of pressure building on him. But having watched a lot of that Australia series, I didn't think that he looked in bad touch at all. I actually thought he played really well, and then played quite a lot of silly shots. There was one, I think, possibly at Brisbane in the third game, when he sort of battled through a new ball spell that was kind of as good as the 36 all out in the first test of the series, but battled through that and then kind of hooked it to fine leg. You're like, what are you doing? And so if there had been a few more low scores, and India have such strength in batting depth, they could easily have gone back to Mayank Agarwal, even pretty sure, for the series in England. But I'm fascinated to see how Rohit's going to do in that series, and this should now ensure that he starts that series, I think.
Yeah, I just find it amazing that someone as obviously classy as Rohit has taken so long to kind of establish himself in Test cricket. I know India have enormous strength and depth, but you think with a player like Rohit, you kind of want to definitively know that he can't hack Test cricket before you discard him, because he's so good. Viewers, a little bit of background before our next nomination. So Ben absolutely loves Ben Foakes. He's borderline obsessed with the guy. There was quite a long period where we had a photo of Foakes stuck to the fridge door in our office, back when we could go to an office, put there at Ben's behest. But seriously though, how did you feel watching him play so well, knowing that we get to see him so infrequently in Test cricket? I mean, his wicket keeping got praise from Gilchrist, Kieran Moray, Matt Pryor, Sarah Taylor, the list goes on. Foakes was nearly flawless with the gloves. And I think you really saw the value of having someone who almost creates chances with his wicket keeping, which is not something you can really say about many other Test match wicket keepers in the world right now. You're on mute again, Ben.
I'll get there eventually. This has been nowhere near as flawless performance from me as it was from Ben Foakes.
Good.
Yeah, you're right about him creating chances out of nothing. There was one, it wasn't a stumping chance. There was a take on the first day when Joe Root was bowling and sort of pitched outside the rough, outside the right-handers off stump. Sorry, in the rough outside the right-handers off stump, and then obviously pitch and span away more. And normally it's the kind of thing where you'd look at it and think, okay, nothing you can do, goes over the shoulder for 4 byes, but not really byes. They're like, oh, it's harsh that goes against the keeper. But Ben Foakes, I think the key was that he actually stayed offside of the ball for quite a long time, because it meant that his head still had line of sight for where the ball pitched and then spun. So it then meant that he was able to move really quickly because the beat had still gone across, and then his hands could go up and take it. He is absolutely brilliant. And while Joss Buttler has improved a lot as a keeper, and he kind of takes the chances that he should, there's not obvious glaring errors in his game. He is very good. Ben Foakes is, yeah, he does effect dismissals. I described him in a piece, kind of England's John T. Rose, in the way that he's a genuine wicket-taking option. And even away from India and where it's spinning a lot, he still does add quite a lot of value with the gloves, because he just has such a great range of ground coverage, because his footwork is so good. So it means not only does he take chances down the leg side that no one else could take, but he also allows first slip to start wider, as you see for Surrey. Like, the first slip can start really wide there, and he'll still cover all that ground in between. And so it gives England sort of more coverage there as well. And especially in England, you see so many chances that sort of fly through that third and fourth slip area, that with Foakes there, those would be genuine catching chances. So I mean also he was brilliant with the bat in the first innings on a pitch. He looked, I think, the most comfortable England player throughout the whole Test match. I know that Moeen sort of scored a quick 43 off 18 that meant his wasn't quite the highest score, but he looked, as he did in Sri Lanka, really looked like he had a very clear game plan against spin. Just looked basically completely unruffled, knew that he could trust his defence, sort of knock runs here and there, and sort of just cruise along until you were kind of surprised that he was sort of near to 50. So I think last week, we gave, was it Axar Patel? We gave the Ben Foakes Award for the most improved player out of the side for, you know, how much Ben Foakes' reputation has kind of grown in the 2 years since he was a Test cricketer, when, you know, there's a section of England fans that think he can sort of do no wrong. And this was can only give him the Ben Foakes Award for the most improved performance in the side for actually being as good as we remembered and kind of had built him up to be.
Yeah, it's so strange. I think that I think he is genuinely brought down in perception wise by how good he is as a keeper, that people almost understate how good a batsman he is as well. This is a guy who averages around about 40 in first class cricket. He averages more in first class cricket than at least one or maybe two of England's top six. So this guy's a really good batsman. There's an argument, I know, Ben, we've discussed before, there's an argument that if he weren't a keeper, you'd almost back him to score more runs than some of England's specialist batsmen, in Asia in particular. On keepers, Rupin, Rishabh Pant had an excellent Test match behind the stumps. You'd like to nominate him for an award as well?
Yes, so around the same discussion that we are having, Rishabh Pant gets the Yas Rana award for improving himself as a wicketkeeper so much and in such a short space of time. Because we all remember what happened in Australia, we all remember the reactions to it. And there has always been this tug of war between him as a batsman and him as a keeper. It happened in the first Test as well. So, you know, should Kohli just play him as a batsman? Should we just try something else with him? And I think he has finally shown that there is scope for improvement, at least in that arena. And Kohli praised him a lot in the postman presentation. He said that he has worked a lot on his keeping, on getting smaller, on losing weight, on his footwork. And I think it showed the stumpings in particular were incredible. And it just seems like if he is confident enough, he tends to play the best. And if he is batting well, which he has been doing consistently now, it is now showing in his keeping as well. And this is a quote from Jos Buttler last year, which said, I know that if I'm going to continue to be a wicketkeeper in this team, I have to do better. And it almost seems like exactly the quote that Pant had last year similarly as well. So it's just, I think it's a good comparison to have and a good person to look up to for Pant. And yeah, he just seems like one of India's most star cricketers right now. And he just has a way to influence the game no matter what he is doing. And if his glove work is increasing, then I think the debate is just over now. Like, he's one of the first names on the team sheet now.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an absolute superstar. And I think that we were talking last week about how if Pant's not keeping very well, particularly in home conditions, that brings up some difficult questions for India in terms of the balance of the side. Because if you want to get a world-class keeper in Sahar, you can't have five bowlers. So Pant keeping as well as he has done just makes them look a stronger, better balanced side. And a quick question still on Pant. Do you like his chirping behind the stumps? In the early hours in the UK, I can find it quite jarring. It's quite loud. Are you okay with it?
I think if you understand it, it's manageable. But yeah, like even when we are working on the game and he suddenly screams, it's a little bit shocking for us as well, who are working on the game and not watching every ball. But I think his enthusiasm is sort of important in this team right now, because it mostly has senior players who have done this and, you know, been there, and sometimes their energy might tend to drop, and he is, you know, constantly like, come on, our heads are dropping, our body language is not good, we need to do better. And I think with enthusiastic cutlets, it's always two things. It's either too much or it helps the team go forward. And I think right now it is like, at least it is not bothering the team from what I can tell, and they seem to enjoy having him around.
Yeah, I think personally he chirps sort of as he bats. I mean, he kind of he says whatever comes into his head when he's wicket keeping, and I think he just plays whatever shot comes into his head when he's batting. And even if he's not quite good enough to always pull off the first, he seems to be good enough to pull off the second. So yeah, but I think, and it's interesting, I mean, especially when it was behind closed doors or you're in sort of like an Aussie sort of cauldron, it's very, very important to have a keeper who is keeping the energy up, even if it's a bit irritating for the viewers. Maybe now he'll fade into the background now that we've got some crowds back, but again, I wouldn't count on it too much.
Yeah, I'm not.
And I think the irritating bit is sort of like he's doing it on purpose. He knows that the players are just, they can't understand him. And just today, he said the same thing 3 times, each time increasing the decibel of what he was saying. So it just seems like he knows what he is doing, and he is just, shithousery that we use in football. I think it's time to associate Pant to that as well now.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna quieten down anytime soon. Viewers, if you saw me shake my head a couple of minutes ago, it wasn't because I was disagreeing with Rupin's point about Pant. It was because the news about Moeen Ali going home was confirmed. Genuinely saddens me. I leapt off my sofa when he bowled Virat Kohli on the first day, which was quite a long time ago now. He was England's leading. He took the best figures by an England bowler in both innings, scored 43 of 18 at the very end, and still arguably costing them the Test match in that first innings. Ben, that was such a vintage Moeen Ali performance, and it's genuinely not only sad but kind of concerning from an England point of view how they replace him, given how well he played towards the end of the Test match and how Dom Best bowled at the end of the first Test match.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we can only give him the Moeen Ali award for infuriating flashes of brilliance. I think there's no cricketer who does it better than Moeen, and he's done it again. But I think that while obviously this was sort of another inconsistent performance, I think actually, considering he hasn't, played a Test, even a first-class game for nearly 2 years, considering how interrupted his preparation has been for this tour and this series, I think actually England should have been very pleased with how he did, especially how he improved with the ball through the game. He was wayward on day one, even though there were those sort of, say, those little sparks of genius, like the ball to Virat that he was absolutely shocked at, couldn't believe he'd been bowled, sort of stood there sort of like, are you really going to let this happen to me sort of thing, before eventually having to walk off because he'd been beaten by one, just absolutely too good. But he bowled well in the second innings, I think. I mean, there was still, Leach did bowl well too, and as ever, Leach bowled well without reward, but Moeen does just have that extra little bit that means that he can get out the best players even when they're set, which none of England's other spinners have as consistently. And then there were just that little cameo at the end. That was like the languidly brilliant Moeen that we've sort of have come to love and miss for too long, essentially. I think England should have had more leeway over sending him home for this little bit. I mean, not only did he not play as many tests as they would have liked because of him testing positive for COVID-19 at the start of the Sri Lanka series, but also, I mean, it's been kind of left unsaid that England players are being rested in part because of the Indian Premier League, which is going to have to extend lots of their stays in India. But we don't yet know if Moeen's going to even play a part in that. The auction is on Thursday, and he doesn't have a contract at the moment. He was released by ICB at the end of last year. And if he's not contributing as regularly with the bat as he hasn't in general, then Indian IPL sides don't tend to go for pure off spinners, especially ones who don't take wickets in that format as regularly as Moeen does. So I think it's reasonably likely that you won't get a contract, and then you're kind of sending him home for not much. In terms of how England rebalance, I guess the one saving grace could be the next Test as a day-night test. We don't know exactly what the surface will be, but if they want the ball to stay in any sort of condition, it can't be as dusty and as sort of ragged a surface as this one was, and the outfield is going to be pretty lush as well to keep the ball fresh. So they may well go into it with 3 quicks and just Jack Leach as the spinner. I wouldn't be against that. But yeah, I mean, and with how England talked about Dom Bess after the last game, that didn't sound like what you talk about a player you're going to bring back in one Test time. That sounded like a player who'd been dropped for a while to go and work on his game, which was harsh depending on how Bess bowled at some points in the series. But if that's how they felt based on his very poor last day performance in the first Test and how he bowled in training afterwards, then it's hard to see what could have changed really between now and then. So yeah, their rotation policy, while laudable on the whole, this is where you can quibble with it the most, I think. And I think it's a real shame that Moeen, having sort of just looked like he was maybe falling in love with Test cricket again, is now having to take a 2-test break. And sorry, just finally, I know I've talked for a long time on this, but this is what Moeen does to people. Is that it's hard to see when he'll next play a test for England after this series, considering how good Jack Leach has been. He's surely now England's #1 spinner, and England aren't going to need a second spinner after this series for a while, really, because they got 7 home tests and then they go to Australia, where Moeen really struggled last time, and where it's normally one spinner at the moment. So we might have even seen the end of Moeen Ali's test career in perhaps the most infuriatingly Moeen Ali test match performance possible.
If you're going to go, that's the way to go. 43 off 18. So yeah, you're right. The England's rotation policy is laudable, but Moeen Ali is a fringe white ball player at the moment. He's not a guaranteed member of England's first choice 11s, and I think England do really need him here. So I just can't get my head around it, to be honest. Next up, another Indian hero this test who we haven't actually mentioned yet. Rupin, is there a more valuable player for India in home tests right now than Ravichandran Ashwin?
He is probably my favorite Indian Test cricketer right now. He just seems so underrated for some reason, for someone who has picked up so many wickets over the last few years. I think top wicket taker since 2015. He still seems to go under the radar compared to how much he does. So the award that I would like to give him today is the Jimmy Anderson Award for just being unplayable at home. And he was just so good in the first innings with his bowling, and today morning with, again, where he just bamboozled the batsman, he nutmegged people, and he was just being himself, enjoying playing at his home stadium. And even in the presentation, I think he said that, he's a very hardworking cricketer, and when things don't work out for him, he just works harder. And I think that shows in everything that he does. These are two cricketers, Anderson and Ashwin, who are just so intelligent, very self-aware, and even though the stats don't show their performances in a certain way, sometimes they know how they have performed and what effect they had on the game. And I think Ashwin deserves more credit now. It's been a while that he has been doing so well. He even scored 100, and his batting seems to be getting back to where it was a few years ago. And it just seems that he is a cricketer who India are they do use him properly, but I think he still deserves a lot more credit even from the management. To think that an intelligent cricketer like Ashwin, he has never captained India, and anytime, anywhere, his name is not mentioned. When Rohit came to Australia, he was the vice captain directly. So seems to be that there is a lot more that he can offer on the management side of things as a part of the leadership group. And him and Anderson, I feel they are just two cricketers who are probably like one of the best test players of their generation, and they are just going from strength to strength.
Yeah, I think as much as he gets the Anderson ball for being unplayable at home, he should also be for being underrated and much improved away as well. Anderson was brilliant in that Australia series, and Ashwin was brilliant in that Australia series with the ball. And I think that when he got to 100, seemed like the whole of the India backroom staff, and especially Mohammad Siraj batting with him, was happier for him to get to the landmark than he was, which kind of shows that, contrary to what Tim Payne might think, Ashwin's teammates might actually quite like him after all. It's interesting what you talk about his intelligence, because it's not just cricket intelligence with Ashwin, is it? He's but politically sort of talks about issues that are affecting cricket and that sort of thing. And I think you often look at players and think like there's a future coach. I think you look at Ashwin and think there's a future BCCI, ICC president, chairman in waiting, I think.
Yeah, his YouTube videos too actually are quite too good. Actually, they are very insightful, and he just seems to he can do. I think he would be a great commentator as well. There's definitely a bright future after retirement. And even what he spoke after the presentation about the red soil and it not being as as it was in the first innings, like stuff like that from Indian cricketers especially, it is a little difficult to get because they are used to saying the same things again and again. So he definitely is a breath of fresh air in terms of his cricketing acumen.
I don't think that's a problem confined to just Indian cricketers. I think with Ashwin, you're seeing it's really enjoyable when this happens, but you're seeing a very, very good Test cricketer, a brilliant one, as Rupin said, one of the best of his generation, like reaching his absolute peak right now. Like this is probably as good as Ashwin will ever be, and he just looks. I know these were helpful conditions here in Chennai, but he's been absolutely brilliant now for the last few months in a really crucial period for Indian cricket, and who knows what is in store for them the next few months. Well, they could well be in a World Test Championship final, and that series in England after winning in Australia could go a long way to define the legacy of this era of Indian cricket. So a lot to play for there. I'm afraid that is all we have time for on this show. If you enjoy this show, hit the like button, let us know in the comments, and subscribe. And if you want a more in-depth chat on the Test, head to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast feed, where we'll have about an hour-long podcast on the game and everything else that happened this week in world cricket. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time for the all-important day-night Test. Cheers.